Antiochus, ambition, conquest, and defiance. The rise of Antiochus. Setting as the Seleucid court in 175 BC. In the year 175, a man steps forward to seize the throne of the mighty Seleucid Empire. He is ambitious, cunning, and sees himself as a god among men. This man is Antiochus IV, later known as Antiochus Epiphanes, the manifest god. He enters, addressing the gathering of advisors. Antiochus says, "My father Antiochus the Great expanded the empire only to be humbled by the rising power of Rome. But I will restore our glory. The lands of Egypt, the cities of cool Syria, they shall bow to our powers of the Seleucids, mighty once more." The advisor responded, "But sire, Rome watches us closely. They will not stand idly, but if we challenge their ally Egypt." Rising eyes gleaming, "Let them watch. Rome may stretch its hand over all the world, but they are not invincible. I am Epiphanes, the chosen ruler. With the gods on my side, we shall bring Egypt to its knees." And so Antiochus begins his campaign to claim Egypt, challenging not only the might of his rivals, but also growing shadows of Rome. He marches south, fierce and determined, into a conflict that would change the course of his reign and the fate of his empire. Setting is Egypt 168 BC. Antiochus stands at the edge of Alexandria. Triumphant after a successful campaign, he looks ready to claim Egypt when the Roman envoy Gaius arrives. In 168 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes stands on the verge of a great triumph, poised to conquer Egypt. But his path to glory is suddenly blocked by the lone Roman envoy, an elderly statesman sent by the Roman Senate with a simple warning: "Antiochus Epiphanes, I come on behalf of the Roman Senate. Withdraw your forces from Egypt now." Antiochus, confident, smirks. "Old man, who are you to command me? Egypt is within my grasp. I will not be denied." The Roman envoy responded, ordering a line in the sand to be drawn around Antiochus and his staff. "Then decide here, within the circle, whether you will make Rome your enemy. Do not leave the circle until you have given me your answer." Antiochus looked down at this line, feeling the eyes of his men, the weight of his empire, and the shadow of Rome. The shadow of Rome and its legions seemed impossible at this point, and every grain of sand beneath his feet he could feel the pressure. His face hardened as he contemplated defiance, but he knows the price of such a choice. "Very well, I will withdraw for now," Antiochus replied. The Roman envoy watched with a steady gaze, knowing that he had just prevented a war that could consume the entire region. Antiochus, for all his bravado, yields, but the taste of defeat lingered bitterly on his tongue. This leads to the final account. Antiochus, enraged by having to withdraw, he turned his wrath upon Jerusalem, seeking a target for his frustration and rage. Raging from his retreat, Antiochus returns to his empire. He sees with humiliation. To reassert his power and send a message, he turns his sights on a new target: the Jewish people of Jerusalem, the temple and the traditions, everything they hold sacred. He will crush it. Antiochus standing before the Jewish temple, flanked by soldiers, bitterly speaking. They call themselves the chosen people. I am Epiphanes, the living God. Their petty laws and strange customs mean nothing to me. Bring forth the altar, sacrifice a pig upon it, and smear their sacred walls. Jewish priest falling to his knees, horrified. No! Please, great king, do not defile the temple. This is holy ground. Our covenant with the Almighty. Antiochus sneered. Your God does not scare me. This temple will serve as a monument to my power, to the triumph of Hellenism over your backward ways. Bow before me, and perhaps I will be merciful. Now with that, Antiochus ordered the ultimate desecration of the temple, the sacrifice of a pig on the holy altar, and the transformation of the temple into a shrine for Zeus. The Jewish people were devastated, and the seeds of rebellion began. Hi, I'm Dr. David Santos. Welcome back to Ancient Mediterranean History. We are continuing our study, working our way through history. And this week we're going to look at the time period we call the Hellenistic period. And it's really the period from Alexander the Great's death to the rise of the Roman Empire. There's some pretty amazing stories in here and some important history. So we start out with this brief introduction to ancient historiography and the authors of the period. So historical writings in antiquity, they have ancient historians. They chronicled each event as a moral or a political narrative. A lot of the time, they're using history to teach and sometimes simply to persuade. So some of the key historians, first one is Diodorus Siculus. So he wrote this Bibliotheca Historica, which is world history from myth to its era. It's emphasizing the rise and fall of its leaders. Polybius, you've seen him before, and he wrote the histories. It's focusing on political strategy of the rise of Rome, particularly Rome's intervention into other cultures and societies around them as they went forth and conquered. Oftentimes, when they would conquer an area, they would simply make it like a colony. It would to some degree, it would maintain its own culture and government. However, there'd always be this overarching Roman influence above it. So from there, we've got to remember Plutarch. He's one of our important ones. He wrote Parallel Lives, and this is a character-driven account, and it reveals how individual virtues and vices shaped historical events. And so the historical perspective here is ancient writers often presented events through a Greek or Roman lens, and they offer these contrasting perspectives. So we need to be aware of all of them and be able to blend our understanding of history as we do our studies. So the division of Alexander's empire. So we previously looked at Alexander's death. And as we think about Alexander's death, he simply declared, as they asked him, who should take over for you when you're gone? And simply he said, let the strong take it. So what ends up happening is it splits into 4 different distinct regions, and each one taken over by a different general. So overall, we call this the Diadochi, and the Diadochi simply means the successors. And as we look over this list right here, key figures, the first one we see Antipater. He takes over Greece and Macedon. Ptolemies, they end up with Egypt and the beginning of the Ptolemy dynasty. And Seleucus, he begins the Seleucid Empire, and they're going to end up with Babylon and Persia, and they're going to begin this Seleucid Empire. And that final of the 4, Lysimachus, he takes Thrace. So 2 of these are going to obviously become important to us, especially as we're thinking about biblical history. We're going to see the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. Much of Daniel 11 is pre-written history, called prophecy, about this time period. So that becomes one of the most important chapters for us to study, especially to learn about how history and prophecy are related. So important thing for us to study. So the War of the Diadochi is 322-275 BC, and the battles to control Alexander's empire led to the eventual formation. This is the 3 Hellenistic kingdoms. Like I said, there's 2 that are really important to it, the Seleucids and Ptolemies. They're going to have some key battles in here. Like we said, this Diadochi idea is successors, and that's from the Koine Greek. Some of the key battles that we're going to see that you can look up and study into: the Ipsus in 301 BC, the Corobotium, which is the 281, and that's where we start to see solidified powers and divisions. So our historiographical insight is that the Diodorus frames these conflicts as stories of ambition and betrayal, and he critiques the leaders who all seem to always fall short of Alexander's vision. So this rivalry between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies is important. The Seleucid and the Ptolemaic empires, they clash frequently, particularly over Syria. So this sometimes gets described as the Syrian Wars. There's 6 wars primarily over territory in Syria and Palestine. So key battles here, the Battle of Raphia, that's in 217. So in that one, Ptolemy 4, he defeats Antiochus 3. And this gets problematic because all of these folks keep rehashing the same name. So you got to be careful as you watch this. And in this case, we see this moment where there's this temporarily establishing a Ptolemaic dominance. And the dominance or hegemony is going to go back and forth just a little bit between the 2. And at times we see these marriage alliances. In this case, we're talking about Cleopatra I. She's the daughter of Antiochus III. She marries Ptolemy V around 193. So it creates a peace, but the problem is she ends up continuing to side with her husband against her father, and that creates different kinds of conflicts. So she's not to be confused with the later, more famous Cleopatra, who we see united first with Julius Caesar. and being queen of Egypt. So we already saw this line in the sand moment, so we won't dwell on it too much. Maybe just add this piece of it. It's in 168 BC. The Seleucid king Antiochus IV, which, like the name Epiphanes, he wanted to declare himself to be God. But when he does that, there's a problem. As he interacts with, especially the Jewish people, they twist that name just a little bit, and they twist it to say Epimanes instead of Epiphanes. And Epimanes simply means madman. So they recognize his character and identify it appropriately. So we see his ambition really is what drives him. But Rome puts an end to this, and they come in, draw the line around the sand, and really make it clear that if he goes into Egypt, he will be starting a war with Rome. So you might be wondering, why is Rome protecting Egypt? And the big deal between Rome and Egypt at this point is Rome needs wheat. They need bread, they need food, because they have a growing empire, they have a gigantic city. So the main connection there is Egypt had become the wheat belt for the Roman Empire and the city of Rome specifically. So they come in, they want to protect that location, and they are able to do so. So that leads to Antiochus. He goes home, but he's quite upset, and he realizes that there is a place that's not under Roman protection, and he could cruise on back to Jerusalem and take whatever treasures they have and really take advantage of their inability, he thinks, to defend themselves. And we see this story of the desecration of the temple. Daniel and Jesus both refer to this as the abomination of desolation. Jesus, of course, is looking back on that event in the Olivet Discourse. Matthew 24 describes it as the abomination of desolation. But when Jesus does that, he's using it as a foreshadowing of something that is yet to come when he's giving that sermon. We would say, us from the dispensational background would look at that passage and say that is still a event we're anticipating, still a future event prophesied by Christ. So we'll be able to go into that in future times in other series, though. So the historiography here is Jewish sources like 1st and 2nd Maccabees. They emphasize this act as a catalyst for Jewish resistance. It's a defining moment of oppression. So the Maccabean Revolt, 167 to 160, it's led by Judas Maccabeus. It's where the Jewish forces launched a guerrilla campaign against the Seleucid rulers, and that's amid all the chaos that was brought in with the purpose of reclaiming their religious freedom and really taking back the temple and cleansing the temple. The key figure is first Matthias. He's a priest. He initiates the revolt, which was carried on by his son. Well, really all of his sons, but Judas is the one that gets a lot of the credit. They have victory and ultimately rededication of the temple. So after years of resistance, the Jewish forces recapture the temple. They come in, they purify it, and this leads to the later celebration of Hanukkah, Festival of Lights. We even see that particular festival being affirmed in the New Testament in the Gospels, particularly Gospel of John. So, historiographical insight, Jewish historians highlight the revolt as a defense of faith, while Greek sources often depict it as rebellion. So maybe just to add a couple more things here, simply the maybe apocryphal, maybe completely accurate account of the Maccabean revolt as they recapture the temple. There's this interesting ancient story, and it goes something like this. And it is the story of Hanukkah. Why is there 8 days? Why is there 8 candles in the menorahs? Just things like that. And as the story goes, when they recapture the temple, they rededicate it, and they light the flame, which is part of it, and it's fed by olive oil. But all of a sudden they realize they don't have enough oil to keep this lamp lit. So the problem is it takes sanctified oil. So they start the process, but that process takes 8 days. And the miracle of Hanukkah is simply that lampstand continued to burn fully and completely in all its glory for all 8 days while they were able to prepare this new oil. So the new oil comes about, and the miracle took place of it never went out. So therefore, the celebration lasted that way. So the rise and fall of the Hasmonean dynasty, that's who comes next. It's the formation of the Hasmonean kingdom. It's following the revolt of the Maccabees. It establishes this dynasty, which is a Jewish state which achieved political independence. There is some expansion, but there's internal strife. Hasmonean dynasty extended their territory, but it ends up falling into internal disputes, and that's going to be their greatest downfall. And the key events, a conquest by John Hyrcanus and Alexander Jannaeus, they extended the state's reach, but their descendants clashed over control, leading to civil war. And the Jewish records depict this as a loss of religious unity and moral integrity, while Roman authors highlight the political instability that invited Roman intervention. So by 63 BC, so you can see this is a very short-lived movement. By 63 BC, the big boys come to town, and Roman general Pompey, he enters Jerusalem, and that ends the Hasmonean independence and just puts it into it. Rome is now in control. So we won't go into those details. We'll skip over those for this time. So briefly here, the historiographical overview of the Diadochi and Hasmonean periods. Primary sources: Diodorus, Polybius, Plutarch, 1st and 2nd Maccabees. They're all the ones that offer this diverse perspective, some from a military perspective, some political, and others religious. Diodorus and Polybius, they emphasize the political events and the consequences of Hellenistic fragmentation. Plutarch focuses on individual leaders, and he reveals how personal traits shaped the period. And of course, 1st and 2nd Maccabees center on Jewish religious movements. So the rise of Rome and the fall of the Hellenistic kingdom. Roman conquest, it's in First Macedon, it's defeated in 168. And that marks a tremendous shift. And the Seleucids, they're annexed at the same time as Jerusalem, Judea. They're annexed in 63 BC. And Ptolemaic Egypt, it fell with Cleopatra VII and her defeat in 31 BC, and it marks the end of the Hellenistic independence. So, of course, these reflections from historiographical work. Ancient sources often glorify Rome's role in civilizing these regions, but modern historians highlight the cultural and political loss for Hellenistic society. And that is our study for this week. As always, may the Lord continue to bless your studies. And if I can do anything for you, please let me know.